money is not the same as capital. Money is not the same as capitalism. And so this is an important distinction that needs to be made. However, okay, so of all the commodities, right, they all function in essentially the same way, right? Of course, a chair can be used, is used differently from a car or an airplane. But the important thing is that there's nothing special or unique about them in the economy, right? It's buying a chair, buying a plane, buying a house, right? You don't have to engage in anything special. I mean, you might need to take a loan, or if you're rich enough, you could just buy them as such. But again, nothing unique. However, there is one commodity that is special, that is unique, above and beyond all other commodities. And this commodity is labor, human labor. Because labor, unlike every other commodity, produces new commodities. It is human labor that turns, right, an empty field into a farm. It is human labor that turns sleeping iron into a skyscraper. And it's human labor that turns blank pages into a poem. Human labor also must first create and give oversight to the automated factories and the computers who in turn, right, do other things like produce automobiles. But even if you have an automatic, right, robot arm doing the work, that is ultimately grounded initially on human labor, right? So this is a unique commodity. Also, it's unique because it creates, but except for the most basic economic activities, most human labor uses tools, right? Pretty self-evident. Under the Marxian analysis, these tools are known as the means of production, right? And the means is what you use, and therefore production. So pretty self-evident, means of production. So everything from a factory to a hammer would count, right, as the means of production. And one should notice that of these things named, right, all these economic types, right, all these economic activities, they exist in pretty much every single economic and political system. None of these, either individually or collectively, are unique or make up capitalism. Capitalism is something fundamentally different from all of these parts, even if they're put together. Surplus value is the heart of capitalism. Let us return for a moment to the commodity form of labor. Now, capitalists buy and sell labor at a market price relative to every other commodity on the market. You can pay a wage, right, for about what it would cost, right, an hour of labor, what it would cost, you know, for a so-so dinner at Applebee's, right? But, so they pay a wage or a salary or a rate, and this is the exchange value of that labor. However, unlike other commodities, they don't consume it, right, and destroy it. Instead, they put it to work. And this is the real essence of it. The work done, right, by labor is its use value, or labor power if you want to get nitpicky and overly scholastic about it. And something really, really strange happens when you put labor to work. The use value of the labor generates a new commodity. You put someone to work mining, you get ore. You put someone to work in a factory, you get, I don't know, foldable ladders. But what happens, right, is the value of this new commodity in the exchange is greater, right, than the price paid for the labor itself. And so I want to be really clear. A lot of leftists make a very facile argument, which is, well, capitalists, you know, are just exploiting because they pay people very low wages, right? The implications of this argument is no. They pay a fair market, which is to say, relative to all the other commodities, they pay a market price for labor. They pay the exchange costs of labor. And those, right, as we'll see, I believe in the next lecture, right, those exchange costs of labor are different in different areas, right, but they're real market costs. So from the capitalist perspective, they're doing everything on the up and up. There's nothing controversial to them about what they're doing. But this difference created between the exchange value of labor, the use value where it's put to use, and the new commodity that arises from that being put to use, our foldable ladder, that difference of value is called surplus value, right? Because it's in addition. And this surplus value, most people know as profit. Surplus value, or profits, are the essence of capitalism. And most anti-capitalists call this extraction, right? This process of creating surplus value from labor, exploitation. Now, one should not devalue, right, the importance of analysis in the capitalist mode of production, right? The analysis of that is important, but that is not even close to the entire story. And unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately for you, I won't have time to go into that because we'd be here for a while. However, capitalism also functions as a political economy. Capitalism entails a whole host of political conditions to ensure the possibility of this economic system. Well, what sort of conditions? Well, capitalism has historically required a certain level of liberalism, right? That is to say that capitalism requires the conception of the individual as the primary legal, political, and economic subject. Previously, like the estate systems, right, it was the aristocrats and the clergy who had political rights as a class. And their actual individual rights were, to a certain extent, not particularly important, right? So rather than having a state, rights as a class, capitalism for its production, for its system, requires individual rights. Now, of course, when you're confronting monarchy, this makes capitalism a liberatory and revolutionary ideology, right? To assert that every individual has rights rather than, the aristocrats or the clergy as a class is a revolutionary idea. But of course, we've moved, hopefully, slightly beyond that. And so, of course, the consequence of selling labor like a commodity requires the individual to stand as a legal individual who has the legal right, as a capitalist, to buy labor, and the legal right, as a worker, to sell labor, right? So, ironically, slavery is very antithetical to capitalism. Slavery actually gums the systems because you don't have the responsiveness of buying and selling labor. You just have, right, straight up exploitation that doesn't occur between, exchange value and use value. And because you don't have that, right, you don't have this constantly circulating system of investing and producing and failure and, success, it stagnates. And so again, in this case, compared to feudalism, capitalism is an incredibly revolutionary ideology. But of course, that's compared to feudalism. So of course, right, with this background, we also have laws that must exist to protect and expand the ability of capitalism to create new markets, to hold property, and to ensure regular economic functions. Those who assert that the state exists to serve a few wealthy capitalists, like Bill Gates, or the Rothschilds, or the capitalists belonging to the Trilateral Commission, they miss the point, right? The state doesn't exist to protect any individuals. It exists to protect the system of capitalism. And so the state may, as a matter of fact, protect, an individual or a corporation based on their political connectedness, or because of, right, its necessity for the functioning of the capitalist system. In common terms, when the state protects an individual capitalist or corporation because that corporation or capitalist is essential to the functioning of the system, we know that by the term too big to fail, right? And so this is not something that has gone by the wayside. Too big to fail and the protection of individual capitalists has existed since capitalism came into being, and it will, I would wager, continue to exist as long as capitalism continues to exist.